He walked through the cemetery the way you walk through your own soul. Slow steps, no rush, carrying a weight his body didn't show. Just another silent Sunday, one of those days when time whispers, truth's routine tries to hush. In his hands, a bouquet of white lilies, always the same, always fresh. It was a ritual that let his grief keep its dignity. But that day, before he reached the grave, he saw her, the same woman he'd helped the afternoon before, dirty, hollow-eyed, wrapped in a torn blanket. Yet something in her had shifted. She wasn't begging. She was kneeling at the name of the woman he'd loved most, praying, wordless, as if she knew every tear he'd forgotten how to shed. In that instant, time froze, not because of the flowers, not because of the pain, but because of that unlikely meeting between two worlds that, at first glance, should never have crossed. Him, a millionaire, surrounded by everything money can buy, yet stranded in an inner desert no luxury could fill. Her, unseen, ignored, her face marked by life at rock bottom. And still, she was the one kneeling, paying respect to a sorrow that wasn't hers yet felt like it was. What was she doing there? Who had she been before all this? And why, after receiving only 300 rays, had she come to that exact grave? He didn't ask. He didn't dare break the silence that bound them, because for a second, something inside him knelt too. Something he hadn't visited in years, his own soul. And on that cold marble ground, for the first time in a long while, he wondered, not with his head but with his chest, what am I doing with my life? The answer didn't come in words. It came in images, memories, sensations he'd locked away just to keep functioning. But now, he didn't want to function. He wanted to feel, to remember what it meant to be alive on the inside. And that encounter with the invisible woman, right at the grave of the only person who'd ever truly seen him, was the start, the beginning of the end of the character he'd been playing. And maybe the first step back home. Routine as a straitjacket, when the soul hides behind habit. He woke up every day at the same time, drank the same coffee, wore the same cologne, drove the same streets. He lived a life where everything worked, except him. On the outside, perfect order. On the inside, a scream smothered by repetition. He'd built a prison out of routine. And the safer it looked, the farther he drifted from himself. His pain wasn't loud. It was a silent ache disguised as efficiency. People admired him. Yet he couldn't remember the last time he felt truly alive. Living had become mechanical. He didn't wake, he just got up. Didn't eat, just refueled. Didn't talk, just replied. Day after day, he vanished inside his own skin, like someone fading yet still moving. His soul no longer screamed. It had learned to whisper, and he'd learned to ignore it. Habit had become armor. Deep down he knew. Change hurts. Questioning takes courage. Stepping into the unknown feels like leaping in the dark, hoping there's ground. So he kept going, producing, avoiding, as if productivity could numb the emptiness. But the void doesn't buy it. It doesn't vanish. It waits. Until one day, something as small as giving cash to a stranger toward the veil of routine. Because in that act, without meaning to, he touched her pain, and accidentally touched his own. As if life said, I'm still here, even if you forgot me. In that brief meeting, he felt that the safe routine was actually the biggest danger, because it protected him from living, body present, soul absent. Living on standby is surviving in captivity. He was there, yet not. Hitting schedules, shaking hands, smiling for photos, everything perfectly timed. But inside, it was like watching life through glass. Nothing truly reached him. Not joy, not sorrow. He breathed but didn't feel air. Walked but floated through a dull dream. His soul had slipped away quietly, like someone leaving a room without a sound so no one notices. He never caught when it started. Maybe the day he swallowed a truth to keep the peace, or the moment he held back tears to look strong. Maybe it leaked out little by little, like a cup that seeps through cracks until it's nearly empty. Fact is, he was surviving in captivity, an invisible cell where he was both prisoner and guard. That absence doesn't show in mirrors. It shows in the weight on your shoulders, the rush for no reason, the snap over little things. It shows in the struggle to hold eye contact, even with your own eyes. It shows when night falls and silence brings a restlessness you can't name. So you drown in distractions, tasks, promises that tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow copies today, and today copy-pastes yesterday. Then he saw that woman kneeling. So surrendered to someone else's grief, she felt more present than he'd been in years. Their silent presence together revealed a deeper absence. Himself. He, who had everything, realized he'd been gone a long time. And that hurt, not like a stab, but like an old longing suddenly back. A longing for himself. To be whole. To be alive. The mirror doesn't lie. You just learn not to look. The bathroom mirror was big, spotless, well-lit, but he no longer saw himself. He'd memorized his own face. Where the wrinkles sat, the jaw line, the eyes outlined, but he'd lost what lived behind reflection. Time taught him to glance away. Brush teeth without meeting his gaze. Comb hair while staring at nothing. Because facing himself took more than courage. It took truth, and he wasn't sure he was ready. There's a pain that doesn't shout. It hides behind familiarity. A mirror, no matter how clean, shows what you'd rather avoid. The strain of keeping up roles, the weight of unsaid words, the emptiness success couldn't fill. He smiled well, he was good at it. Only he knew the effort under that smile. Because really, he smiled so no one would catch on. Inside, he was exhausted from holding himself up. The day he truly looked at that woman in the cemetery was the day he realized he hadn't looked at himself in ages. Her presence, raw, real, mask-free, reflected his absence. And there, kneeling in rags, she mirrored his soul. Not the glass mirror, but a living one what he quit being. Someone whole, even wounded. Someone present, even poor. Someone real, even invisible. Maybe that's why it stung. Because she, with no home, no name, no place, seemed more at peace than he, owner of everything but himself. And the inner mirror he dodged again forming there, on stone ground among wilted flowers and unspilled tears. A frameless mirror made of silence and truth. And this time he didn't flinch. Small daily deaths. Everything you lose without noticing. He couldn't recall the last time he said a firm no, or heard a genuine yes rise from within. Over time, he let go of anything. First, hobbies that sparked simple joy. Then, conversations that demanded vulnerability. Inch by inch, he gave up spaces, swallowed needs, muted emotions without noticing. Because these deaths hold no funerals. They hide in the everyday. Every time he bit his tongue not to look weak. Every time he accepted something just to keep the peace. Every time he ignored his body, his rhythm, his heartbeat, he buried a piece of himself. Those pieces didn't scream. They simply stopped pulsing. Like a muscle that atrophies and used. Like a flower that wilts too slowly to alarm anyone. The woman in the cemetery carried no flowers, but she carried presence. Presence saying, I lost everything, and that reminded me what I still have. She didn't know about his fortune. He didn't know her story. Yet that scene showed him his invisible surrenders. Suddenly he missed himself. A virgin who loved playing piano at night, who wrote secret poems, who cried at old movies. All dead, and he never noticed the burial. There, facing a marble grave and a rag-clad woman, he understood. The worst deaths aren't the ones that take others. They're the ones that chip away at us bit by bit with each silence we swallow. No one may have seen it. He may have forgotten, but the body remembers. The soul feels. One day it demands resurrection. The invisible fall, when you've already hit the ground but still pretend you're standing. He kept going. At least that's what people said. You're so strong. You handle everything. You're an example. And he smiled, nodding silently. Not out of vanity. He just no longer knew how to refuse. He'd built an iron image and now had to live in it, even though inside everything lay in ruins. Even though he'd fallen long ago, just in a way nobody saw, upright. His fall made no crash. It was subtle. It began when he quit asking whether he was happy, when he justified everything with that's just life, when he swapped dreams for goals, affection for status, presence for commitments. The fall wasn't tragedy. It was a slow erosion of the soul. Cruelest part? He dug the hole, thinking it was a staircase. The deeper he sank, the more he demanded of himself. Meetings, signatures, firm handshakes. But at night, a different silence settled, an emptiness that wasn't absence but excess. Excess effort, excess control, excess pretending to be fine. Admitting he wasn't okay felt like betraying everything he'd built. Seeing that woman on the ground, kneeling with dignity, hurt more than any fall. She was in ruins, sure, but she owned it through surrender, through silent prayer before a loss not even hers. She didn't need to look strong, and maybe that's why she was. He, in contrast, upheld a castle already demolished inside. And that day, faced with that brutal simplicity, he felt it. He was already on the ground. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. The soul craves silence. Awakening starts when the noise stops. His house was never quiet. TV on with nobody watching. Ambient music filling the void. Calls, meetings, messages, alerts. He claimed that's how he worked. Silence bothered him. But deep down, it wasn't silence that hurt. It was what he heard when everything stopped. In that pause, the soul spoke. And he didn't want to hear it. Noise was his armor, a smoke screen covering feelings trying to surface. He couldn't stand being alone in silence because silence told the truth. And that truth was plain unbearable. He'd lost himself. Not in an accident, but in distractions, in goals, in duties keeping him too busy to feel. In that cemetery where the whole world seemed suspended, silence found him again. Not the awkward hush of home, but a sacred hush, full, not empty. The kneeling woman said nothing, yet he understood everything. The mightiest prayer is wordless. The deepest presence makes no fuss. God, or whatever's bigger, doesn't shout. He whispers. Only those who quit running can hear. In that moment, he felt a pause inside, a clean blank page. He realized the silence he feared was actually an invitation. To listen, to return, to remember. The soul doesn't get lost in noise. It just goes quiet and waits until we're brave enough to hear it again. Running from the mirror. Why we distract ourselves so easily? He said he had no time. His calendar was packed, days too short for all he had to handle. But truthfully, he just wanted to run from himself. Because when quiet fell, the inner mirror began forming. Something inside him squirmed, a nameless discomfort, impossible to ignore. So he rushed to distraction. Any distraction, screen, task, headline, static. Anything but stopping. His pain wasn't from lack of stimulus. Quite the opposite. He was hooked on staying busy, so he wouldn't feel what bubbled behind routine. It kept him always alert, never present, always informed, further from himself. Because every time the world went quiet, his heart spoke. And he didn't want to listen. Listening meant facing what he'd postponed for years. Truth. The woman in the cemetery had no phone, no stories, no motivational posts. She simply was. Present. Before pain, mystery, loss. That shared presence, even brief, was an unexpected mirror. It showed how lost he was in noise, how his mind sprinted to dodge feeling, how his soul begged daily for attention. And there in that silent scene, he finally understood. His problem wasn't time, it was courage. Courage to stop. His constant rush wasn't strength, it was flight. No matter how he distracted himself or kept moving, truth waited in the same spot, deep in his chest, where no distraction fits, where only silence reaches, where only presence heals. When the heart hardens, the layers we build to avoid hurt. He wasn't born this way. Nobody is. But over time he stacked layers. Armor of sarcasm, canned answers, emotional efficiency. Layers that shielded, layers that pushed away. Every disappointment, a new plate of steel. Every loss, another wall. Until he couldn't tell where protection ended and prison began. Whole on the outside, unreachable inside. His heart had once been home, a shelter, loving freely. After so many wounds, it shut. He never noticed a moment he traded depth for safety, only realized when everything around him was under control, and he still felt alone, like living in a castle where no one enters, not even him. The woman in the cemetery had no armor. She was exposed, torn by time, life, abandonment. Yet there was something in her surrender he'd forgotten. Courage. Being vulnerable in that place, in that condition, was an act of strength, not resisting, but yielding without losing herself. She hadn't hardened. That stirred something long buried inside him. He understood then, the defenses we build to avoid pain stop us from feeling, eventually from living. His heart wasn't dead, just shielded. No one had locked it but him. And maybe, for the first time, he wanted to crack it open, just a sliver. Let some life seep in, even if it hurt, even if it scared him, because more frightening than pain was living numb. The illusion of control, the arrogance of thinking you own tomorrow. He always had a plan. Every step meticulously charted. Impeccable agenda, precise calendar, 5-year goals. He lived convinced he could dodge surprises. That control would keep him safe. But life, silent and sovereign, bows to no spreadsheet. When the unforeseen knocked, he didn't know what to do with empty hands. His wife's death wasn't in the plan. There was no time slot for absence, no emotional prep for emptiness. He tried to manage grief like he did business. Logic, deadlines, milestones of getting over it. But the soul has no project timeline. Grief blindsided him. Not because it was sudden, but because he believed he could predict everything. In the face of an absence you can't patch, he stared his arrogance down. The kneeling woman seemed to grasp something he'd spent years denying. She didn't fight the uncontrollable. She surrendered. There before death, she was humble. No need to understand, no need to change it. Just present. And that confronted him. Everything he leaned on, control, strategy, spreadsheets, was useless in real life. He saw then. His pain lay not in the loss itself, but in resistance. The blind effort to dominate what was never his command. His suffering was a child of illusion. The myth that if he did everything right, nothing wrong would happen. But what's wrong to a soul that came to learn? He didn't know, still doesn't. Yet something inside bowed then. Not from weakness, but from reverence. Some wisdom only appears when we accept not knowing, not controlling, just being. The first drop of truth, when the inner lie starts to end. It was tiny, almost imperceptible, a pebble in his emotional shoe. But inside, something shifted. For the first time in ages, he quit justifying. He quit arguing with his conscience. In silence, he admitted, this isn't life. No scream, no breakdown, just a truth, a shy truth, but real enough to pierce every defense. The lie he lived wasn't for others. It was for himself. The idea he was fine had moved on. That time alone heals all wounds. But he hadn't moved on. He'd frozen pain into protocol. That kept him functional but absent. Present in places, absent in feelings. Present in photos, absent in memories. Then he saw, not with eyes but with heart, the woman still kneeling and his own soul kneeling beside her. Not before the tombstone, but before truth. That truth was simple, almost childlike. He missed her. The wife gone. The man he was with her. The meaning that seeped through their talk, their silence, their gestures. For so long he tried filling that void with achievements. But achievements don't hug back. Something cracked. A thin layer, thick enough to hide pain for years. Split quietly. No tears, no drama. Just one thought. I can't keep running. Small but everything. Because truth returns not as thunder, but as a single drop. The first drop to hit the desert. And hint the soul finally wants a rain. The dark night of the soul, when the lights go out so you can really see. He no longer understood his emptiness. It wasn't sadness now nor pain. It was deeper, a kind of existential fatigue, as if every answer had lost its flavor. Everything that once made sense felt far away, washed out. In that night silence, he sensed something inside flick off. Not defeat, surrender. The surrender of someone who's tried everything, except stopping trying. The dark night arrives unannounced. No lightning. It sits next to you and waits. When he stopped fighting, he started to see not with eyes but soul. He saw his excesses, his fears disguised as ambition, his achievements that took him away from himself. He saw the life he'd built and realized it wasn't his. It was assembled, not lived, in that inner blackout where no external light reaches. He remembered what he'd forgotten: faith. Not recited prayers or promised salvation, but raw, quiet faith born when you stare into the abyss and choose not to run. He understood what the kneeling woman symbolized. She had crossed this night and somehow came out whole. Not intact, but whole. He didn't know how to cross or how long it would last. Yet something inside set firm. He would, not with answers, but with presence, not with guarantees, but surrender, because the light he sought wouldn't come from outside. It would crack open from within, birth in the womb of darkness itself. From the courage to stay, to not understand, to trust. And in that instant, he felt it. Darkness was also a way, breaking character. When you're tired of acting, he'd become a pro at being what people expected. The success story, the ideal husband, the admired leader. Lines rehearsed, expression controlled. Inside, though, he was drained, soul fatigued. Acting equals walking without rest. Smiling when you want to cry, agreeing when you want to run, and worse, forgetting who you are by pretending so hard. The contrast hit him like a slap when he saw that woman who faked nothing, dirty, alone, real. It hurt because, despite all his resources, he was the one begging for acceptance, recognition, belonging, and there, at the grave of the woman who knew him inside, he didn't want to lie anymore. Not to others, not to himself. The mask no longer shielded. It only weighed him down. He had no strength left to hold it. Something collapsed, not with scandal, but with truth. He cried openly, not for her, not for death, but for himself. For everything he gave up to fit in, everything he buried alive for an image. In that restrained sob, the first freedom was born. The freedom of no longer needing to fake it. Living starts when the acting stops, and he finally wanted to live. For real. The wound is portal. Only those ready to be reborn break open. His pain wasn't just a memory anymore. It became a doorway, a rupture point between who he was and who he was ready to become. But he didn't know that yet. He thought pain meant failure. Feeling so much meant losing control. He spent years skirting the wound, masking absence, drugging the silent scream in his chest, until he realized no healing happens without passing through. The woman in the cemetery didn't console him. She spoke no word. Yet her image, kneeling before pain not her own, opened a space he feared. Surrender. Some wounds don't come to knock us down. They come to break us open and reveal, not a new version, but the truest one. He understood, heart bare, soul shredded, that the wound wasn't punishment. It was a path. Right there at the pain's center lay his essence, raw, pre-title, pre-recognition. And as much as it burned, something sacred glowed. Pain saying, now you're ready. Ready to drop what no longer fits. Ready to be reborn without backtracking. Whoever crosses their own pain honestly never returns the same. They return clean free. In that moment, without knowing what lay ahead, he felt it. He was cracking open, not to fall apart, but to finally be revealed. The forgiveness that sets you free from yourself. He always thought forgiving was a noble gesture toward others, a compassionate act he offered from some moral high ground. He forgave old betrayals, hidden abandonments, harsh words from people who didn't know love. Forgave with style, from a distance, with poise. But he never forgave himself. That was the quietest prison. Inside, a courtroom ran nonstop. For the wife he couldn't save, the coldness he'd use as armor, the times he was absent when she needed him most. He blamed himself for moving on outwardly, while inside everything stayed frozen. He carried invisible weight, not for mistakes made, but for the ruthless demand never to fail. Seeing that woman kneeling stirred the knot, not because of her, but because of what she awakened: humility. Humility of someone who knows they err, fall, lack answers. She was at peace with her condition. He wasn't, still fighting to earn forgiveness. In that instant, something cracked, and amid the pain, a thought slipped in: what if guilt isn't necessary? What if he could walk free even without understanding everything? Self-forgiveness wasn't gesture. It was surrender, acknowledging he did the best he could with what he knew, a silent hug to his own humanity. Through that first tiny gap, his chest opened. He felt guilt didn't make him fairer, just farther away. And the freedom he saw depended on nothing except allowing himself to start over. No debt, no weight, just truth and peace. The other as teacher. Encounters that shatter our certainties. He didn't know her name or her past, but he knew she'd pierce him, like a stone in a calm lake. Her simple act sent deep ripples. What started as generosity became a mirror, crooked, uncomfortable, necessary. She, invisible to the world, made him see what he refused to face in himself. For years, he surrounded himself with people just like him, reinforcing his beliefs, validating his choices, admiring his facade. But life teaches by contrast. In meeting the opposite, he woke up. She, stripped of everything he possessed, held a piece he'd lost. She, who had nothing, seemed whole. He, who had everything, lay in pieces. It defied reason, and that's why it hit. The flash of anger he felt seeing her there, a brief judgment, was only fear. Fear of facing what she embodied. Vulnerability, surrender, presence, everything he avoided. But there was no going back. That woman, on that cold ground, was more than random. She was life's answer to the unspoken question he'd never dared to ask. Why am I still incomplete? When seen honestly, the other reveals parts of us we haven't accepted. He there thanked her in silence, not for praying to the grave, but for tearing the curtain, showing the backstage, and without knowing becoming a teacher with no diploma, no podium, no agenda, just a living soul. And that was everything. The courage of not knowing, surrender without a manual. He spent life hunting answers. Behind every choice, a spreadsheet, every decision, a plan. The unknown scared him, because not knowing meant losing control, the worst feeling. He avoided questions with no solutions, feared what couldn't be predicted. But facing what that encounter sparked, he felt different. A discomfort that didn't want logic, an emotion that resisted labels. For the first time, he didn't want to understand. He wanted to feel. Feel whatever the moment brought. No manual, no justification. Just presence. It was new, scary, and oddly liberating. Life lived under total control shrinks. He now saw how small he become trying to predict the unpredictable. The kneeling woman appeared answerless, yet fully surrendered. Wholly there, not knowing what came next. That hit deeper than any book. Wisdom without words, trust without theory. He realized faith doesn't grow from knowing. It sprouts from not knowing and still moving forward. Walking without a map, feeling without guarantees, trusting without comprehension. In that uncertain space, something was born, not an answer but strength. The strength of someone who no longer needs to master everything to keep going. The courage to finally let go, groundless, shieldless, but truthful. Symbolic death, burying what no longer serves you. No formal ceremony, no goodbyes, yet inside something was being buried. Not a person, but a version of him, an old mode of existing. A character fueled by fear, vanity, outdated habits. He felt it in his body, a sacred exhaustion, each cell begging for rest from non-stop resistance. It was self-mourning and at the same time the herald of something new. His tears weren't only for his wife. They were for the man he stopped being after losing her, the tenderness he locked away, the love he froze, the parts of himself he left behind just to survive. Now he no longer wanted to survive. He wanted rebirth. For that, he understood he had to die first. Not his body, his ego control image. The cemetery woman symbolized that cycle. She didn't know it, but she'd shown how you can die in life and still go on whole. She lost everything, yet there she was, intact. He, owning it all, still lugged the weight of what he hadn't dared release. In that contrast, he found the key. Symbolic death isn't ruin, it's right. The intimate gesture of looking within and saying, "This no longer fits." Something fell away, not with collapse, but like a leaf letting go in autumn. No rush, no trauma, just nature. He let it go. Let it die with respect, silence, surrender. Because sometimes you have to bury who you were, to let who you are bloom. And finally he was ready. Ready to let go. Ready to let be born. Silence after the storm. Peace isn't the absence of pain, but the presence of truth. He walked the cemetery path, like a man returning from an inner war. His steps no longer hurried. There was no relief either. But something new showed: serenity. The storm inside hadn't fully stopped. Rain still fell, wind still blew, but he now knew peace isn't when everything quits. It's when you remain standing through it. That peace came from no advice, no prayers, no kin phrases. It came from silence, from surrender, from the honesty of having looked inward and not flinched. For the first time, he wasn't running, and that changed everything. Running drains energy. Staying, even if it hurts, restores. The silence once avoided was now a shelter, dense, yet welcoming. The woman was gone, as though she played an unnamed role, but her presence lingered inside him, not as memory, but symbol. She was the spark, the mirror, the turning point. Now he needed no more signs. He'd found the compass, and it didn't point outward, it pointed in, an inner place not seeking explanations, only meaning. The pain remained, but now it was an enemy. It was guide, voice, part of the journey. He understood at last. You don't erase pain to find peace. You accept it as part of the path, part of you. In accepting, he found rest. Not the rest of escape, but the rest of truth, the kind that exists only when the soul quits lying to itself, reuniting with your essence, coming home without changing address. He came home that day like someone back from a long trip. Everything was in its place, walls, furniture, familiar smells, but something had changed him. For the first time in years, he entered unrushed, touch-forgotten objects with newfound gentleness, took a deep breath, and felt that in this once automatic space, life existed. He didn't need to go anywhere to find himself. Essence doesn't get lost, it only sleeps. He'd spent years chasing it in goals, wins, people, but what he sought was always there, in brewing his own coffee in the house of silence, in a laugh once shared in the kitchen. He didn't need to change everything, only remember who he was before trying to be everything. The cemetery woman never knew his name, yet somehow led him back to it. Not the one on documents, but the inner name only the soul knows. She said nothing, but woke an ear he'd lost. Slowly, he started hearing again no external voices, but his conscience sensitivity, truth. The return home was quiet, yet inside it was a party. Finding yourself again is like coming home after years of wandering. Same house, same furniture, but the eyes now see. See essence behind form, meaning where routine once lay. Thus, without changing address, he returned to himself, to what he always was before forgetting, a new birth. You're not what you lost, you're what endured. He didn't wake up transformed next day, no magical light through curtains, no sense of triumph. But something was different, quiet, like a field after rain, like lungs that no longer need to prove anything. Because now he knew he wasn't what he'd achieved or what he'd lost. He was what remained. Deep down, everything he'd gone through, pain, grief, breakdown, journey, hadn't destroyed him. It refined him, stripped the excess, the illusion, the defense. What was left was real, essential, him, simpler, whole, true. So when he thought of the woman in the cemetery, he felt no unrest, only gratitude. She didn't just wake him. She reconnected him to what's most intimate and sacred, presence. The grave that once stabbed now was symbol, not just of an end, but a beginning. Every honest farewell hides a birth. He felt it. By letting parts of him die, others finally emerged, effortless, mask-free, fearless. Perhaps the greatest discovery is this. You're not what was taken from you, not what failed, not what ended. You are what still stands, even in silence, what endured the void and chose to stay. That is strength, the most invisible, the most real, the most yours. Because in the end, what matters isn't what broke, it's what bloomed.